Hey, my friends, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and we're going to start out all sappy and sentimental here. About a year ago, before COVID happened, I stopped by my alma mater. There was a conference there. I was filming some stuff. This is when I went and did the Coptic video in Chicago. And I dropped by the seminary side of the campus and knocked on a few doors. And sure enough, a couple of my old professors were there, people who really shaped my life. And one in particular, Dr. Scott Manich, is sitting there in his office, and I literally had my little hat in my hand, and I'm like, "Hi, you might not remember me, but I'm like, Matt Whitman." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that means a lot just to even know that you remember my name." And he invited me in and was so warm and enthusiastic to share about what's been going on in his life and the academic life of the institution, and had all kinds of questions for me about what's going on with me. And so we compared notes on that, and he looked at some of the stuff I've been working on, and then just gave me this beautiful, meaningful blessing of encouragement. It was like, this is just great. I'm so proud and so excited that the stuff we worked on together here has been something that you've chosen to run with. And man, that meant a lot to go back to a place that was so formative and influential for me, and to receive that kind of reception meant probably way more than it theoretically should have for a functional adult, if I qualify as a functional adult. And likewise, I have to imagine it would have meant a ton for Jesus of Nazareth to roll back into Nazareth with his family, probably with his family, and to have him come around the bend and a couple people look up and they're like, "Oh, is that Jesus? No way, no way." And the hand goes up and they wave and Jesus waves back, and he comes into town, and the cooper and the blacksmith, then the guy that makes the shoes and the cloaks, and the ladies that all remember him from back in the day, and the friends' parents all come around. They're like, "Whoa, it's been too long, buddy. Welcome back." I mean, you've been all over the place, right? We've heard about you in the news. Kind of don't know what to make of all of that, but you get the benefit of the doubt. This is your home. Come sit at our table. Come hang out. Your money's no good here. Let's hear the stories and catch up on where you've been. But that isn't what he gets. Again, I suppose that we could look at this and be like, well, he's God. He doesn't need that crap. Come on. Like, he doesn't need affirmation. Yeah, but he is all man. I mean, the Gospels paint a picture of an incarnational Jesus. He's all God and all man, and he never comes off as emotionally fragile. I'm not suggesting that at all. But he did grow up there. He grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and men, which means there was a process, and these people observed that process, and they know who this guy is, and they know his character. But instead of having that moment, he gets not really the opposite, but something even worse. He gets overwhelmingly indifference, and then he gets the laziest, the most useless of all the human emotions, offendedness. And that's it. And then he leaves. And that's the entire anecdote. Here's the passage once again in Matthew chapter 13, starting in verse 53, right at the end of the, in my Bible at least, multi-page Kingdom Parables discourse. Here's how it goes. When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there, that's Capernaum. Coming to his hometown, that's Nazareth, he began teaching the people in their synagogue, and they were amazed. "Where did this man get this wisdom and these miraculous powers?" they asked. "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things?" And they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown and in his own house is a prophet without honor." And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. So he doesn't get the warm reception. There's not going to be any kind of Rogers rate or special hometown deal here. Instead, he just shows up and does, where's it at? Matthew 9, something. Does the same stuff that he was doing back in Matthew 9. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. He was itinerant. This is what he did. He went around and he said the same stuff. Not a lot probably got circulated in print. Most of the news that traveled would have traveled by word of mouth. And so that's part of the reason that as we go through the Gospels and we line up everything that happened here, a lot of times it looks like he said something very specific in one place, and then it looks in another gospel like he said that same exact thing somewhere else. Well, the reality is he almost certainly said that same exact thing, not just in the one place and in the other place, but he said it probably 11 billion more times in other places along the way, because this is what he did. He went around and talked about this kingdom stuff. He's been on message the whole time. So he goes and does the same thing in his hometown. It has the same effect that it had in the Sermon on the Mount. Everybody's like, dang, that is authoritative. That is very quality teaching. So nobody can deny that this is excellent content, but still there's a shift that very quickly occurs. People start doing the mental math and they're like, well, where would he have learned all of that? He didn't go to seminary. He didn't go study under some rabbi. He hasn't even really been gone that long. This is just kind of weird. And even if we're to believe that he just suddenly got brilliant and became this amazing rhetorician, orator, public speaker, what about the miraculous powers? Where did that stuff come from? I mean, what about the time that he and the other kids were playing in that tree and Brittany fell out and broke her arm? How come he didn't fix that back in the day? What's with the miracles now? And actually, since I bring it up, there is some apocryphal literature that describes Jesus doing some miraculous stuff as a kid on the playground that's all recorded outside of anybody's version of the canon of the New Testament. So we're on a continuum here, and the continuum starts with somewhat indifference that Jesus is back. I mean, he gets to speak in the synagogue, but he's getting to speak in synagogues everywhere, and lots of people could speak in synagogues. He's welcome, I guess, but nothing special. Everybody's very impressed, and then it moves to questioning, well, where did all of this come from? And then it moves to familiarity breeds contempt. I mean, we know his whole family. Simon, Judas, Joseph, and James. They're not special. They're not asking for any favors. They're not out doing the same stuff. I mean, they had the same exact upbringing. What is so special about this Jesus character? His sisters, we know them too. And so in this moment, they pivot from having a few questions to being overtly suspicious. And then very quickly from there, they pivot toward taking offense at him. I can picture what happened here. If you've ever been a part of any kind of institution at all, be it a church or the teacher's lounge or a job or a circle of friends or a ball team, I mean, anything, you know exactly what it's like when that little drop of gossip or suspicion happens from the plastics, the Dotties of the world, the people who control the social dynamic. And they look at the thing and they're like, I don't know why, but this seems like somehow it's not going to be to my benefit. And they're like, not that impressive. And maybe everybody's gushing a little bit. And they're like, hey, yeah, Jesus is back. This is great. And that person in the circle is always the one who introduces the little nudge toward division. They're going to be like, I don't know. It's pretty good. Not that impressive, I guess. I was more impressed with this other thing that this other person said. I mean, I don't know. It's fine. If everybody likes it, it doesn't really move the needle for me. And that nudge from that social position is often enough to get that little snowball rolling downhill and gaining momentum to the point where you score style points for being against or not that impressed by this thing. This is how even politics works now. And we see in this passage that snowball gaining momentum and rolling downhill. And so on the one hand, it's very useful narratively to see the anatomy of the rejection of Jesus, to see how it breaks down in a place that you would figure would, at least on the surface, be the most likely to be excited about. Like, this is a source of community pride, but that isn't their response at all. It breaks exactly the opposite direction. So again, narratively, it's interesting to see the anatomy of the collapse. It's also interesting to see why the gospel kingdom thing goes out to the Gentiles who receive it with such enthusiasm, while the people who seem best positioned once again to register who Jesus is and what he's about and to be excited about it are not that excited about it. They're indifferent, or as I said earlier, even worse, they're offended. The laziest, least consequential, and least value-producing of all the human reactions. So it's fascinating for all those reasons on the narrative side, but it's also fascinating because this one holds up a little bit of a mirror to you and me. Wherever you are at, unless you are the wild exception to the rule, you are a part of some social pecking order. And you play one of these roles somewhere in that social pecking order. And no doubt, if you're a human, you've participated in getting the snowball rolling downhill on some other stuff and probably looked back and felt icky about it. Hopefully at other times you've avoided getting caught up in that stuff. But this right here is a very human moment that provides a little window into the mentality and the soul of people a couple thousand years ago, for most of us listening halfway around the world. And what we see is they're just like us. There's an intellectual laziness here. There's a relational laziness here. There's an insularity here. I don't even know if that's actually a word. And there's an insecurity here. And that cocktail of human emotion I just described, whether you're talking about back then or right now, produces most of the gross things that we experience socially that leave us feeling icky, either on the receiving end or on the giving end. We did not get to the stuff at the end about the miracles or lack thereof. We will break that down tomorrow. But the bottom line for what we looked at today is that this is one of the few passages where I feel sorry for Jesus. I understand that sounds ridiculous, but you want him to go home and have this amazing experience and be well received and receive the blessing of the people who know him the best and who have hung around with him the most. But he knows what the deal is. And just a chapter earlier, he understood that these kind of rejections were coming, and I think we could just as easily take his words at the end of chapter 12. Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and my sister and my mother. And we could also just amend that slightly in our heads to read something like, here's my community and my neighbors and the people I grew up with who know me the best. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my community and my neighbors and the people I grew up with and the people who knew me best. Jesus didn't just take a metaphorical bullet at the cross to build this new family of faith. He also took a metaphorical social bullet throughout the course of his life in order to create this new family of faith, this new community of faith that is the kingdom. Thanks again to everybody who just signed up to support the program at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast. That is super rad. I have tried to reach out to each of you individually to say thanks. If you haven't got a note from me yet, keep an eye out because it's coming. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.